So what we're looking at here is the thick filament. The thick filament is myosin. And so a myosin molecule, they say it's two like globular things, and they're kind of twisted together. It has two heads. This is known as the cross bridge here at the heads. I'm not worried about that right now. So if you label that the tail and that the head, we're going to put a couple more things. I'll put two things, and I'm going to make it like that. It's actually on both of them. These are called the cross bridges, but that's not how I'm going to label it. So these little things that I've put in here are actually actin binding sites. Or actin receptors, but binding sites is actually a better term there. Okay. So this is a site on the myosin where the actin will bind. Makes sense? That's what's called actin myosin. And I'm just going to put it down here. Make it look more roundish. That it's also on that one in the back too. This is also a binding site. This is an ATP binding site. So on a myosin molecule, on the globular heads, what's called the cross bridge heads, it's got two binding sites. It's got actin binding sites and ATP binding sites. Both are very important to our story that we're going to talk about next time. Okay, so the myosin is the thick or the thin filament?
Thick.
Yeah, so this is the thick one. And a lot of students will say, that doesn't look very thick. That kind of looks thin. But the reason it's thick is because they look like that. They don't just, there's just not one. So there's one, but they layer on top of each other. And they all have the binding sites for ATP, binding sites for actin. So this is why it's called thick, because they do. Because students are like, that doesn't look very thick. And we just had to look at one where you could see it. So that's myosin. I don't care that you have the word complex there, so we'll take that up there. So this little yellow guy here is called troponin. And these are all chemicals. The pretty pictures help our brain a little bit better. Let's see in the chemistry behind it, the biochemistry. This thing that looks like a rope is really a chemical. These are all proteins. These are 3 different proteins. This is called tropomyosin. And the things that look like, I don't know, I would use the analogy grapes, but honestly, they look more like purple olives, because you know olives have the pit area with them. So the purple balls or whatever you want to call them there. So that's actin. So the reason we say the thin filament is actin is because it's mostly actin. You see, it's mostly actin. It does have troponin and tropomyosin as well. So it does have 3 things instead of just the one. But we say actin is the thin because it's mostly actin. It does have the other 2. Way you could remember which one's the thin and which one's the thick. Actin is act-thin. It doesn't have the H in it. So actin doesn't have double T's in it either. So, but the actin acts thin. So it's the thinnest one. I don't know. That might be silly, but it doesn't matter. All right. So we're going to add a couple more things to this diagram as well. And so what I want to add is, let's see, I'll do this one right here. So do you see the black area right behind this rope thing? That's what I'm wanting to label there. And so this is a myosin binding site. Okay. Do you see how it is blocked? That's important. So this guy's called troponin. That one's also called troponin. And on troponin, there's some little binding sites as well. I'm just going to label the one over here because it's going to get messy. So this is actually a calcium ion binding site. All right. So on Thursday, we're going to go into a lot of detail about what's going to happen, but I'm going to give you the trailer. The trailer is just to kind of get you a little story. And some of you know the story about actin and myosin, and some of you don't. Okay, actin and myosin want to be together. So this little guy here and that little guy want to bond to one another. Okay, so this little part of this guy wants to bond with that of that guy. But there is a problem. Do you see the rope? Tropomyosin? Tropomyosin is causing trouble for myosin. Why is tropomyosin causing trouble for myosin? It's blocking the site. Do you see it? It's blocking the site. And what's holding that in place is this guy. Troponin is holding onto this rope. I'm going to call it a rope. It's really a protein. It's holding on to this protein so that tropomyosin is blocking this little site. It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet. They can't be together because their parents are being evil to them, right? They won't let them be together. So actin and myosin want to be together, but tropomyosin is blocking the site and troponin is holding the tropomyosin. Do you see what this is? Calcium binding site. If calcium binds into this site, this guy gets all out of whack because anytime things bind chemistry-wise, we get a shape change. So calcium would bind into here. This guy would let go of. If we let go of the rope, this is going to be exposed. And the minute that gets exposed, guess what's going to bind in there? Anyone? What would bind into the myosin binding site? Right, myosin. Oh, you are so good. So good. Are y'all there? Am I talking to a white dot?
No, we're there. I just didn't know you were looking for myosin.
Okay, so that's what's going to happen. Calcium's going to bind into this spot. This guy's going to let go of that rope. The minute that is exposed, this guy is going to bind to this little thing right there. Okay, so there's like these lovers now can be together. That's called a muscle contraction when the actin and myosin come together. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that is a part of the story. Well, where do you think the calcium might be coming from? Oh, might be coming from the gel? Maybe. All right.
Bone remodeling.
The SR?
Yeah, the sarcoplasmic reticulum holding that calcium. Something's probably going to release the prisoners from the gel. I don't know. Maybe something called like an action potential that might be being sent from a neuron down the way somewhere.